Well, Mr. Modi and Mr. Trump, they had a conversation on the phone, and it's been trending. Now, what is your reading of this entire phone call? And I mean, of course, there are news reports and there are news reports, but what is your reading into this situation?
Well, they were actually supposed to meet in
Right.
the G7 summit on the margins, but Mr. Trump left early, and then we had the phone conversation, 35 minutes. We have had a readout from the Indian side. We haven't heard anything from the American side. The Indian side, it was very, very clear. I think there were a couple of messages that the Indian side wanted to put out. And, we had the foreign secretary telling us very clearly that Prime Minister Modi told President Trump there was no room for any mediation in any sort of contact or engagement with Pakistan. And Mr. Modi pushed back on President Trump's narrative that he helped stop the clashes between India and Pakistan last month. I think that's something that needed to be put out in the open, and we've had President Trump saying it more than a dozen times that he brokered a ceasefire, he used trade to stop India and Pakistan fighting. But that narrative, clearly very few people in Delhi are buying into it. I mean, did the US have a role? I'm sure they did have a role, but I don't think to the extent that President Trump believes.
Also, Mr. Modi's refusal to visit Washington despite the invitation. Uh, what is the story behind that?
Well, the timing would have been very curious because, of course, during the conversation, what we have been told is that President Trump asked Prime Minister if he could come to Washington on the way back from Canada. Obviously, the Prime Minister turned him down because he had to go to Croatia. But if the Indian side had accepted that invitation, we would have had the Prime Minister in Washington at the same time as the Pakistani army chief.
Yeah.
And that's something that possibly the Indian side would not have been very keen on. So, I don't think the Indian side would have liked the idea of being in the same room or even in the same circumstances or, in the same city as the Pakistani army chief.
Asim Munir's visit to Washington has also come as a surprise to many, right? I mean, it came out of the blue and a lot is being made out of it.
Well, for me, the biggest takeaway is Trump 1.0 was the time when he called out Pakistan, said that they were deceitful. They were, in spite of being given hundreds of millions of dollars, they were, still not, cracking down on terrorism. And Trump shut off all military aid and, other kinds of aid to Pakistan. And now in Trump 2.0, suddenly we are hearing American generals referring to Pakistan as a phenomenal partner for counterterrorism. And, they're, we seeing the president hosting Field Marshal Asim Munir for lunch in the White House, which is something that has never happened before.
Exactly.
Other Pakistani army chiefs have gone to Pakistan, to Washington and met the president, but they have gone as military dictators, as military rulers, not just as the army chief. So in that sense, this meeting, it's not something that would have gone down well in New Delhi.
And at the same time, at this point, we are having this negotiation for the BTA, which is expected at least the first phase is likely to be in place before the 9th July deadline is, we hit the 9th July deadline. Now, that also will have an impact. Do you think so?
Well, this all comes back to President Trump's bizarre policy of using tariffs for doing trade. And this is the reason why we have had to, negotiate the BTA. Well, we probably will have some sort of a deal before July 9th. But then, we've even had American officials saying that they may extend the deadline.
Yeah.
So, one never knows with the Trump administration. But I think the Indian side would want to do a deal so that, the grounds are prepared for President Trump to come to India for the Quad Summit towards the end of the year.